to be ever acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Good morning. So the first thing that struck me when I read the gospel today is how timely this is, because didn't the description of the scribes make you think of every single presidential candidate? All of them? And it's timely because it's stewardship time too. But I think Bob Walters is going to be talking to you about that later today. So we're going to focus on the difference between the scribes and the widow. And before I go into my thoughts on this story, I should explain. I had a Sunday school teacher once, when I was, I think, first or second grade, who dreaded seeing my hand go up in class, because I usually had the question that she had not prepared for. For example, when she taught us the story of Mary and Martha, my question was, why didn't Jesus just tell one of the apostles to do the dishes so that Martha could sit down with Mary? Quite frankly, I still wonder about that. So naturally, I read through the gospel this week, and some inappropriate questions popped into my mind. Why was the widow giving away everything she had? Isn't that irresponsible? Doesn't that make her a burden on the public? The motivation for the scribes is very easy to understand. They're seeking public praise and honor. And while that's something that Jesus dissuades us from doing, it is in fact a very integral part of our American society. We don't have royalty or nobility like the countries that our ancestors came here from. So we don't assign you a title or a specific job based on what family you were born into. But we seem to need something to fill that gap. So we thrive on competition, on achievement, and on ambition. And any person who succeeds in this way, whether it's in business, in politics, academics, sports, or the arts, becomes a celebrity, which is what we seem to have designated as our form of royalty. And any public relations agent will tell you that for a celebrity, appearances are everything. Image is much more important than reality. We are a nation of scribes. The widow, on the other hand, is operating from a completely different perspective. The scribes are giving away money they don't need. She is giving away money she actually is relying on. And she is not going to get any praise for it. After all, the poor are poor because they lack ambition. They're not willing to work hard enough. They don't know how to manage money when they have it. If one of the scribes noticed her making her donation, he'd probably muttered something about how she's just throwing money away because she expects the government to take care of her anyway. Because sometimes first century Judeans sound exactly like 21st century Americans. Not surprisingly, Jesus comes down firmly on the side of the widow. In the Sermon on the Mount, he is challenging us to be like her when he says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit," meaning those whose spirits acknowledge that they are dependent on God for survival. The American rich love to talk about how they built up from nothing, and they don't like to admit how luck or privilege or the family that they were born into, or anything other than their own efforts played a part in acquiring what they have, because the value system they're operating from is that you only deserve what you achieve. The poor, who according to this evaluation don't deserve because they haven't achieved, on the other hand, are more generous than their wealthy counterparts. Like the widow in the story, the poor in modern-day America give away a higher percentage of their income than the rich. And that is from the National Center for Charitable Statistics, so you know I didn't make it up to make the sermon sound good. So why do the poor give like this? They have far less to spare, and they don't get the social credit for it that the rich do when they give. The only remaining answer is that they are giving from the heart. That is why Jesus points out the widow's poverty when he wants the disciples to understand the importance of giving from a place of love. The widow in the gospel story isn't interested in the honor of her community. She knows she's not going to get that. She is giving because she wants to do whatever small amount of good she can. And that is what earns her Jesus' praise, an honor which is far above anything that the world can give her. So what does all this mean for us here and now? How are we supposed to give? One way to avoid giving for the sake of honor is to give anonymously. That's something that's an option for many people. The widow, though, didn't do that. She didn't give in secret. She did it out in the open, where people were free to either make fun of the small amount she was giving or to make incorrect assumptions about her motive for giving. The key is that the widow gave without caring who saw her or what they thought about it. She was giving only because she wanted to give. And that may be the hardest part for us as modern-day Americans, giving without regard for the judgment of those around us. Pope Francis made this same argument at a conference of Italian bishops in May of this year. And these are his words. If we step outside of ourselves, we will find poverty. Today, and it breaks my heart to say it, finding a homeless person who has died of cold is not news. Today the news is scandals. That is news. But the many children who don't have food, that is not news. This is grave. We can't rest easy while things are this way. We cannot become starched Christians, too polite, who speak of theology calmly over tea. We have to become courageous Christians and seek out those who need help the most. This is happening today. If investments in banks fall, it is a tragedy, and people say, "What are we going to do?" But if people die of hunger, have nothing to eat, or suffer from poor health, that's nothing. This is our crisis today. A church that is poor and for the poor has to fight this mentality. When I read that, I thought that his courageous Christians sounded a lot like the crazy Christians that Bishop Curry told us about last week. I really hope those two get to meet each other someday. I think they would get along really well. Okay, so now it's time for your homework assignment. It's Beth, that means there's homework. And gee, suddenly I can't help remember that it is pledge season and I am the pledge secretary. So obviously the first part of your assignment is, if you haven't filled out your pledge card, please do so. Keeping in mind that St. Francis is called to be, just as Pope Francis said, a church that is poor and for the poor. Your vestry has been delighted to see this year that we are on track for meeting our goal of 10% of our income directed purely to outreach, including our ministries like Moms, Camp Grizzly, Episcopal Relief and Development, the Heifer Project, Northridge Elementary School, and others. Here at St. Francis, we do not have a praise band, we don't have a youth gym, we don't have a fellowship cafe, but we do have a firm grip on what the church's mission is supposed to be, to minister to God's people, here, nearby, and far away. The second part, which is to make your private giving from the heart, is easy because I've already seen you do it more times than I can remember offhand. St. Francis is an amazingly generous parish that always steps up when need presents itself, whether it's for churches that have been burned, cities that have been flooded, or countries that have been devastated by an earthquake. All I ask is that you keep your hearts open and continue doing the good that you can, whenever and wherever you can. Thank you. And I think Bob Walters is delivering our pledge testimony today.